take me back and tell me the story about why you wanted to become a trial lawyer.
Well, I think, you end up in this business for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes people, I've been interviewed and they say, well, I was moved by To Kill a Mockingbird, and I certainly was. That was one factor. We take with us all of our history, don't we? When we choose to do what we want to do for a living, that history has a big influence on it. And so I think it's significant that my history is I was raised by 8 different families growing up and all over Central Florida. And they were primarily blue-collar workers. These weren't wealthy families. These were people that were living paycheck to paycheck sometimes, were kind enough to take me into their family. And so I've always had that notion that I always wanted to help the underdog. These people, from a scale of cultural evaluation, they would be considered definitely the underdog. That was one factor. The other factor that kind of led me here is I was a journalism major at University of Florida. I was going to be a foreign correspondent was my goal ultimately. And about the last year of my school, somebody said to me, I think you ought to think about being an attorney. So I was kind of nonplussed about it, Chad. Take it or leave it. I knew what I wanted to do. All my friends at that point were going and they were covering the Nicaragua Sandinista story. And it was revolution taking place down there. It was heated revolution. And that's where everybody wanted to go if you had a journalism degree. University of Florida had a spectacular news editing, kind of all-around writing school. I mean, it was Columbia and University of Florida were regarded as the premier journalism schools in the country. So I was really mentally prepared to do that. And then somebody said to me, I want you to meet Perry Nichols, who you've probably heard of. Perry Nichols, it was regarded as the very best trial lawyer of his time. There were about 3 of them that names were kicking around during his time, but he was a spectacular trial lawyer who had really mastered the art of cross-examination, I would say would be his strength. And so I said, well, okay, yeah, I'll meet him and I'd love to see what he has to say. And so I went to his house in Arcadia, Florida. And it was a cinder block house. He was into that kind of Angus cattle business, and he had this place out in the middle of nowhere. And so I go into his house, and I start, kind of inartfully. I don't really even know what to say to this man. I mean, I've got this Goliath of a lawyer sitting in front of me, and I'm halfway thinking about wanting to be a lawyer. And so I said, what is it that sets you apart from other lawyers? And in back of him, he had books, and they were Steinbeck and Conrad and Kafka, some of the greatest writers of the time. He said, son, those are books I've read a couple times. And what he was saying to me is there's nothing magical about what we think of when we think of an idea, that all these ideas typically have been out there. And it's our job to understand those ideas and bring more space and more impact to those ideas, and then deliver them as a trial lawyer. So I walked away from there thinking, wow, I had to really think about it. I concluded, well, I can always be a journalist. I can write, but let me get my law degree. And that's what he had talked to me about. And ultimately, the real irony, Chad, is that, let's see, about 45 years no, good God, 45 years later, I got the Perry Nichols Award in Florida, which is the highest award you can get as a trial lawyer in the state of Florida. So it's kind of funny how things went full circle. So there's a lot of things that have impact on you, but if I'm to distill what it is that you're product of how you're raised. And when you're raised around people as decent as the people that I was raised around, you say, well, that's the side of the V that I want to be on. And I had no interest at all of doing anything but that.